fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. We are entering in through studying a series today and then in the few weeks to come on the book of Proverbs. It has been, over my life, one of the most important books of the Bible that I've read. As a matter of fact, maybe you know this, but Proverbs is set up with 31 chapters. That means that there's a chapter for every day of the month and most months. And I want to encourage you as a church to follow that for this year. I just really believe that we're lacking, not you, but everyone else, lacking some wisdom, including this guy, sometimes in how to relate, how to connect. And so I just want to encourage you this year to join along with us in reading. Make it your goal for every day to read at least a chapter in Proverbs. And so, for example, if today's the 1st, you would read Proverbs chapter 1. If you get to January the 7th and you didn't read, Proverbs chapter 7, don't worry about it in the 7th. Read the 8th on the next day. Because come February, I don't know if you know this or not, the 7th is going to come back again. And in March, and so just keep moving with whatever day of the month it is. Correlate that with Proverbs. For me, I try to do a little bit in the Old, a little bit in the New Testament, and then I try to do at least one chapter in Proverbs. That's what I try to do as part of my daily devotional routine. And I use the routine very loosely because it really is the most important part of my day. But I want to encourage you to do that and to just really take some time. I can't help but think, 3 years ago, something kind of started in our world called COVID. Anybody recognize that, right? And I can't help but think, man, I wonder if everyone would have been reading Proverbs if things would have been a little different in how people responded and engaged and just worked things out, right? All the way from hoarding toilet paper to debates about mask, no mask, whatever, all that stuff. Proverbs gives a lot of insight on how to deal with that. As a matter of fact, Proverbs gives a lot of insight on a lot of areas of it. Proverbs talks about how do you deal with disobedience. I don't know if anybody worries, but how do you fight worry? Proverbs talks about that. Consequences of an unguarded heart. Problems of having an uncontrolled tongue. No one has that problem. It deals with discontentment and lustful temptations and how do you deal with those. And it talks about procrastination and laziness and marriage and finances and how to raise children and how to be a godly son or a godly daughter and how to be a godly father or a godly mother. It talks about revenge and addiction and envy. I mean, Proverbs covers like everything, daily living. And check this out. The person that wrote Proverbs is known as the wisest person in the world. And to this day, I still believe probably the richest person ever. And so I don't know how many of you are really big into reading self-help books or podcasts or trying to be a better person. If you're not reading Proverbs and you're doing other things, you're wasting a lot of your time and money, right? You've got someone that's lived the life that has given us everything that we need to know, really, to be wise and deal with wisdom. And I love the other stuff, so don't get rid of that. I'm just saying that just think about the wisest person to ever live and the wealthiest person to ever live wrote a free book called Proverbs for us to glean so many truths. As a matter of fact, here's why it was written. Proverbs chapter 1, verses 2 through 6 says, "Here are the proverbs that will help you recognize wisdom and good advice and understand sayings with deep meaning. They can teach you how to live intelligently and how to be honest, just, and fair." Chapter 4, verse 4, they can make an inexperienced person clever. So maybe you're like, I'm only, 20 years old, 19, 18. Like reading Proverbs will kick up your wisdom notch quickly, right? They'll make an inexperienced person clever, teach young people how to be resourceful. These proverbs can add to the knowledge and wise and give guidance to the educated. So maybe you're like 80 years old. Like, in other words, Proverbs still has more for you. So for everybody. So that you can understand the hidden meanings of Proverbs and the problems that the wise raise. And so Proverbs was just such a profound book to me. I just want to encourage you, again, to take a journey through 2023 of committing yourself to reading Proverbs as part of your daily devotional life. And I would even add, too, that maybe grab a notebook and just jot down, so chapter 1, here's all these things. Man, one thing out of chapter 1 that really stuck out, just write it down. Because the cool thing is I bet you in February 1st, you're going to read that chapter again and just see if that all of a sudden doesn't spark something with you again. That might be the way that the Holy Spirit is speaking to you about certain areas in your life. And so this morning, we are going to do something a little bit different. We're going to ask the pastoral staff to come up in just a moment, and they're going to share their favorite proverb and why it's their favorite proverb and how it's spoken to them and ministered to them. But let me just share real quickly the way Proverbs is set up. So if you're taking notes, here's some note stuff for you. A verse in Proverbs are set up 4 different ways usually. The first way is called a contrast. And so it's set up like this, that basically there's this word but. So like a wise son accept his father's discipline, but a scoffer does not listen to rebuke. So here's this contrast of what it means to be wise and what it means to be a fool or a scoffer. And so they set this up in Proverbs. Another one that's used is completive. In other words, the second statement completes the previous. An example of Proverbs 16:3. Commit your works to the Lord. So commit your ways to God. Say, hey, God, I need to know your will for my life. What do you want me to do? I commit myself to you, and then your plans will be established. So don't do it backwards, right? Another way is corresponding. That's another type of proverb that is used in the book of Proverbs, which basically expresses 2 lines with similar meanings, but it's really really important. So for example, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Also found in Proverbs chapter 1. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. So in Proverbs 9:10, it's basically saying 2 different ways. Man, fear God, know God, trust his ways, right? A different way of emphasizing that. And then finally, comparative, where 2 statements are comparing with each other. So for example, better is a little with the fear of the Lord. So it's better to have little, but have the fear of God as part of your life, than have great treasures and yet have turmoil. Proverbs 15:16. And so here's this comparative, just get this, that it's better to be poor, if you will, and not have a lot, but be really connected with God in every part of your life, than to be really wealthy in human eyes and totally live in turmoil. And so Proverbs talks a lot about that. So, hey, I'm going to ask our pastoral staff if you guys would come up, and my lovely wife, Pastor Monica, as well, and share maybe your favorite proverb, how God has encouraged you. And how many, by the way, as you come, how many of you guys faithfully read Proverbs? You pretty faithfully. I'm just curious. Keep your hand up. I want to find our wise people here. I'm kidding. Yeah. So think of you guys that faithfully read it. Think about a verse maybe that's stuck with you as we're sharing ours. But I'm going to ask by far the wisest person on our team to speak first, and by far the best looking person on our team to speak first. So Monica, if you would share what God has done through Proverbs in your life.
You're so wise for saying that.
Yeah. Touche.
Good morning. Happy New Year. The verse that kind of sticks out to me in Proverbs is found in chapter 4, verse 23. And it says, guard your heart above all else, for it is the source of life. And so in this verse, it's telling us that, guard your heart more than anything. And in life, we guard a lot of things. We guard our homes. We all have locks on our doors. And we have security built into our car. We keep our money in a bank. So we look at things that are valuable, and we want to protect them. And God is telling us that is your heart. The heart is the most valuable. You need to protect it the most. And so I like this because I need to protect my heart in so many ways. And some of the ways that we can do that is through our eyes, what we see, what we're engaging in on social media, what we're viewing into, that goes into our heart. We need to guard that. And also like our ears, like what are we hearing? What are we listening to? But also like who are we listening to, and who are we letting speak into our lives and getting that inside our brains and our hearts. And then another one is also guarding our thoughts. And this is kind of a big one for me, because sometimes maybe a thought will go through my head, or someone will say something to me, and I can wrap big emotions around that and take that to heart and let it into my heart, and not, instead of guarding my heart, then I start going down that rabbit trail of like doubting and just letting that take over emotionally. So those are ways that we can guard our heart to protect ourselves from that. And then in doing so, we're able to first of all bless others around us, because whatever goes in is going to come out. And so whatever we're putting into our heart is going to come out, and we can bless others that way. We can also bless ourselves, because we can, putting good things out there. So,
yeah. So, like I know you talked a few things about guarding, but like, is there a practical way that you kind of say, like, I know that this is a trigger, or this is something that's going to make me go down a path I don't want to go down, and so before you get there, like, is there things that you do in your life that keep that heart guarded? Like, do you know what's going to take you a certain place, and so you don't get there, or that guardrail? Is there something that you do?
It's true. There is certain things, like for one thing, I don't really watch the news, because I know that's just it's so negative and depressing, and so I just, there's some things you need to know about the world, but there's a lot of stuff that I know it's just going to take my heart into fear, and I know I can't watch that and think, oh, now I'm just fearful and my eyes are off Jesus and the world is hopeless, So I know news is one thing that I can't do. And a lot of times social media, I like Instagram, because it's pictures.
It's
and
Insta.
It's photographs.
I don't know what that means either, but I thought it's Insta. Like an Instagram, but anyway, instant photo. It should be called instant photo instead of Instagram, because it's instant photo.
Yeah.
You can market that.
But sometimes that can also trigger, like, you can start looking at someone else's life, or I can, start looking at someone's life and be like, oh, they've got it so together, or, wow, I should really be doing that, or whatever. And it takes me totally off what God has for me, totally the plan He doesn't have for me, because I'm looking at someone else's life. So I know that could be a trigger. So just things like that, I just need to be mindful of and guard.
I think I'm with you on the social media thing, and probably more and more as whatever our world is going through. But I find myself a lot, social media, wondering about that person or that individual. And then all of a sudden I start kind of getting the spiral of like almost depression or self-woe. Like all your friends are in Florida and you're here. I don't know if anybody else deals with this. And so I try to regularly do seasons of fasting from social media. And I think I'll do it more often now. But, man, that was good. That's a good one. So, Pastor Jake from Milwaukee, all the way from Milwaukee, Jake and Amanda. So Jacob.
Either one's fine.
Jacob. What is the proverb that's really kind of impacted you?
Yeah, so the proverb that's really impacted me is Proverbs 18, verse 2, which says simply that fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delights in airing his own opinions.
I have an opinion on that.
Oh, do you now?
I thought you might have an opinion on that, right?
So a quick distinction I want to make here. There is a difference between sharing an opinion and sharing a biblical truth, right? We're teaching from Scripture. This isn't my opinion. This is me sharing what the Bible has to say. And so the Bible actually has a lot to say about being a fool. I think the word has kind of lost a lot of its meaning in today's culture. A fool doesn't just mean somebody who's like kind of ridiculous or a bit of a jokester, or actually in biblical times, to be a fool was to basically be rebellious against the word of God. You find it elsewhere in the Psalms. It'll say, the fool says in his heart, there is no God, right? So to be a fool is to be opposite to what God wants you to be and where He wants you to be. But if you haven't noticed, I am a very stubborn and opinionated and rather strong-willed person. And
Never noticed that.
I know. No one.
Amanda?
You never picked that up. She's thankfully not here to reinforce it. So
I'm leaving. I don't hear them.
She was agreeing in the first one.
She
Just so
agreed.
you
She's
guys
like,
know.
amen.
Yeah, she's well behind it. She knows. She's gotten it firsthand. And that is, while it comes in handy some of the times where I have some convictions that do need to be stood on and stood for strongly, there's a lot of things that I make mountains out of molehills and choose to die on those hills, and that doesn't make for a very productive faith. It doesn't make for a very gracious or loving message to the world either. And so some of the things I need to remember from this are that, one, I need to have a mind that doesn't just shut something down that I disagree with just because I disagree with it. Having an openness that I may be wrong and I may need to be the one with a perspective shift. Two, I need to understand somebody else to truly be able to know and get the why behind their what. People have different beliefs and convictions and understanding of how the world works, and that's because we've all been shaped differently, right? I grew up outside of Milwaukee. That's going to shape my perspective on a lot of things differently than people who have grown up here in the UP all their life.
Yeah,
it's not right or wrong one way or the other. It's just different. And then to be wise, I need to learn to listen, not just be waiting for my turn to talk. I think a lot of times we ask questions or do things to get our own thoughts out there rather than really gain somebody else's perspective. And then lastly, be humble and admit that just because it's my opinion and I believe it doesn't necessarily make it correct. Again, with the exception of teaching from the Bible, that is correct because that's God's truth, not my truth. So,
That's good. Hey, so we talked yesterday, and maybe you covered this a little bit, but this was a larger struggle, younger. I mean, you're old now. You're like an old man.
Yeah,
man.
so old at 28.
Yeah,
that
so
is, my bones have turned to glass.
In your younger years, like, how did you put it into practice? I mean, what did that look like for you? Because I think it's one thing to know all of what you're saying, but then something else to like put it into practice. Was there something that you did to help put that into practice?
Yeah, a lot actually, because turns out breaking down a stubborn person takes a lot of effort. And so it was a regular discipline for me, one, to really know myself. I have a lot of things I'm passionate about and a lot of things that I care about, and that leads to just strong opinions on things because I care a lot about it. And so really working through myself and understanding, okay, somebody brings this topic up, somebody brings this belief or this practice or this idea up. Historically, I know myself well enough to go, oh, I don't respond well to that, or I respond overly intensely to that, or I have some deep-seated emotional reservoirs that come to the surface when those things get brought up. And so knowing myself well enough to go, okay, this is something I need to tread carefully on. This is something I have a likelihood to not be as kind or loving and gracious in. And then really, again, exercising that self-awareness in the conversation itself. Somebody brings up that topic, instead of immediately going full throttle into, well, here's what you need to think and why I'm correct and listen to me. Taking the time and asking good questions, not to explicitly deconstruct and tear apart what somebody else believes, but to really understand that why. To really get to the root of, okay, you believe this. You think the world should operate this way. Tell me why. Where does that come from? Where is that rooted in? Because when we get to the root, we can actually address it versus just kind of attacking the leaves of their tree, so to speak.
That's good. I kind of want to know what those issues are, but maybe we won't ask those in public right now.
We'll talk this week.
Anybody else want to kind of know, what is the hot button for you? I mean, I don't know.
I just want to know it so I can poke it.
Yeah, that's why he's not going to tell you.
Now I'm taking it to my grave. Oh, no. Well, you'll poke it by accident and you'll
I'll
find
probably,
out.
Yeah, you'll find out soon enough. All right, Pastor Wayland, what's your favorite or proverb or something that's really led you, ministered to you?
So a proverb that has kind of stuck with me for a long time throughout my life, something I go back to a lot, is Proverbs 3, verses 5 through 6. It says, trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. And so this verse has kind of meant two things to me over the years. The first thing is that if you get to know me, kind of get to know my struggles a lot, one of the things I struggle with a lot is anxiety. I struggle a lot with stuff in my head and fighting through that, and what-if scenarios that add just a lot of stress and mental drama needlessly to my life. And so, like, for me to kind of be like, okay, so trust in the Lord with all my heart, lean on my not on my own understanding. Because, like, if we think about it, our own understanding is very small. We have a very tiny perspective of the world. We can think about the past and we try to remember it, but we forget it very rapidly. Yeah. I don't remember what I had for lunch yesterday. We try to guess at what happens in the future, but it's a guess. We don't know for sure what's going to happen in the future. And as much as we're connected through the internet and everything like that, we really only have a very small picture of what actually is going around in our world, in our little town, our little area. And there's such a big world out there. And so we have this very small perspective, and God, he understands everything everywhere all at once throughout all time. And so it's like God has a much bigger understanding. He can see the full picture. I only get like a couple pixels of the TV, and he gets the full picture. And so I'm to be like, okay, my understanding is not that good. God has a bigger understanding. I'm going to lean on his understanding when my mind is like all over the place and is a mess and it's just like anxiety. I'll be like, you know what? I'm leaning on God's understanding, which kind of leads me to the second point of what this verse means to me is that, like, one of the things that I like, and I kind of the expectations I have is I like to kind of control things. I have certain ways.
Well, you like to control things?
Yeah, I
never noticed.
Surprising,
no.
Super surprising. There's certain ways that I like things done. Certain outcomes I want to happen and everything like that. And everyone has that to an extent.
Yeah, we do.
Moms have a certain way they like their house clean. Dads have a certain way they like their cars to run. You have a certain team that you want to win versus the Packers or Vikings today. We all have certain no comment. And so we all have things that we want to happen in a certain way, but we find as we go through life, we're actually very powerless when it comes to life, especially when we encounter things that we have very little, almost zero influence on, like our relative's health or some financial situations or other things. You can think of it in your own mind about things that, like, we just really have no power in, and we don't have a lot to be able to make that happen. And then we try to make it happen in our own strength. Well, I try to work more. Or I'll try to do this more. Or I'll try to be nicer to this person. Or I'll try to fix this relationship. Or I'll try to make something happen in our own strength. And we burn ourselves out. We get tired. We get stressed out. And we end up blowing up. And like just this whole mess and everything like that. And God's like, hey, lean not on your own understanding. Don't lean on your own strength. Acknowledge me, obey me, and let go for me, and I will make your path straight. Right. I will make it easy for you. I will bring victory in your life. But in order for God to get into the gearbox of our own lives and to be able to make everything tick well and run well, we have to take our hands out of that gearbox to let him get in there. And so if we're trying to do all this stuff, and so for me, it's like, okay, my anxiety's high or whatever, or I'm trying to like make something happen and everything. It's kind of going back to this verse and be like, okay, God is in control. He knows more than me. I got to lean on him, let him make the path straight, and let him be the one that owns the responsibility for the outcome. And just relaxing with that and just breathing and being, it's a much better place to live life in.
Yeah, that's good. Without getting too personal, can you think of a situation where you were tempted to like control the situation, the environment, and you let go, and it turned out to actually turn out well? Mm-hmm. That God was still faithful, and even though you really wanted to control it?
Yeah, there's like every week. There's so many different things. Sometimes one things about is think about sometimes with finances. Like I remember there was 1 month a couple years back where me and Mallory were like, we'd budget out the month, and we're like, man, we are like several $100s short. Like, and I did the math, and I did the math again, and I'm like, I do not know how we are going to be able to break even on this month. And I was so stressed about it. And I remember I was like, okay, it was actually during the season of fasting. I think it was like 2 years or something ago. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to let it go. I was fasting against anxiety during that time. I'm going to let go. I'm going to let God have it. I'm just going to release that. And we made it through the month and everything. I looked back on the month and I was like, where did that extra couple $100s come from? And I looked back, we had paid everything. And I was just like, I still don't know where it came from, and it wasn't like we received an extra check or something like that. I was just like, how did that happen? Yeah. And so it's kind of those things, and once you release control and you let God take over and he comes through and everything, because he always comes through, once you start trusting God, you get to see how trustworthy God is. And then it becomes easier to trust him again, and then you can relax and let go easier.
Yeah.
So you just got to trust him, and you'll see he'll come through.
That's good. Hey, so I want to just hit mine real briefly, if you will. When I was younger, I came from an atheist background, and I really, when I got saved, I got really wanted to serve Jesus, and so I used to have the habit of sleeping in really late, like 12 o'clock, 1 p.m. That was, and I felt like I just wasn't doing my life right, and I thought, you know what, like I really want to, like if I'm going to get saved, like I want to be all in, right? That was just me, and I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be like a world changer, and so I wanted to make sure that all of who I was didn't feed into like becoming a Christian. So one of the first verses I memorized is this one. So go to the ant, you sluggard, consider its ways, be wise. He has no commander or ruler, yet stores his provisions in summer and gathers food at harvest. How long will you lie there, you sluggard? When will you get up from your sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a thief and scarce you like an armed man. Proverbs 6 through 11. And that was a verse that was really impactful because it reminded me often that, you know what, like I don't want someone telling me what to do, someone have to like manage me and say, hey, did you do this? Did you do that? Like I wanted to be like an ant. Like no one's telling an ant to provide or get food or prepare. Like an ant just knows what to do. And so I just like I wanted to be like that. So this is one of the most important verses in my life. Was this idea of God, I just want to be faithful, and I want to be a hard worker, and I don't want people telling me what I have to do, but I just want to make a difference. And so this verse was huge for me, even to the point when like I can look back and go, okay, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but it's been a pretty crazy last 3 years with COVID and in a building project. Like there's been all kinds of stuff, and I'm thinking, man, like I need to go back and make sure that I'm still like totally reading like a book every 2 weeks and you know making sure I'm fasting more often and just making sure that I'm still being diligent. So that's something that's been really important to me. And I get to share other ones with you over the next few weeks, actually. So
if I can actually take a moment though, guys, like I don't know if you know, but like Pastor does so much work behind the scenes and every single day. I think Pastor, if I can just take a moment to honor you, sure. You have done an incredible job of embodying this verse and being like a hard worker. So like you say like you do this, and I'm like, man, like you are like a way more harder worker than I am. So
I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, you can have a couple of days off. That's fine. So hey, I hope that was helpful to you. I know it was to me. And can you just give Pastor Monica, Pastor Jacob, and Pastor Wayland a hand for their faithfulness and for agreeing to share? You guys can be seated.